Do you remember being read to when you were really little? Can you think of any stories that were your favorites? I don't have the book anymore, but one of my favorites was from a collection of stories, and it was The Little Lonely House, about a house whose family had moved away, and it watched people come and go on the street, and there was lots of description of that. But then eventually one of the cars turns, and it comes up the drive, and it stops at the house, and a family gets out and goes inside. And the house was filled with noise and light and laughter. I still remember the final sentence. And the little lonely house wasn't lonely anymore. I want you to think about the feelings that are associated with those memories and hold on to that idea for a little bit. So next, I want you to think back to the first time you were asked to read out loud. It was probably in school, maybe in mid-elementary school. And everybody opens their books to the same story, and the teacher starts on one side of the room at the front of the first row, and that student reads for a while. And then it's the next student's turn, and then the next. Do you remember counting and then looking ahead in the story to see which section you were going to have to read? Or maybe it was the variation called popcorn reading, in which each reader got to name the next student to read, and then that student had 3 seconds to begin reading at the right spot. That's a strategy that teachers would sometimes use to make sure that students didn't read ahead and everybody read through the entire story. Think about those feelings, and think about how they might have influenced your attitude toward reading, what effect they had on your classmates. Reading aloud individually is often the second most feared classroom activity, right behind standing in front of the class to give a presentation. And according to the Chapman Survey of American Fears, public speaking is the most common fear among American adults, affecting over a quarter of the population. Children's interest in reading peaks around age 8, according to the Kids and Family Reading Report, which found that, quote, 35% of 9-year-olds report reading 5 to 7 days a week, compared to 57% of 8-year-olds. One girl in the study explained, in 2nd and 3rd grade, I read above my grade level, and I felt really proud of that. But then the books got bigger and bigger, and it got more intimidating. This decline continues throughout middle and high school. It's inaccurate to place all the blame on schools. The most often cited reason for a reduced interest in reading was that students have, quote, so many other things that I now enjoy more than reading, chosen by 60% of respondents. As kids get older and experience more activities, many of them find new things that they like better. And that's okay. As an English teacher, let me just go ahead and say it. Reading shouldn't be the most important thing in your life. I really, really hope that your health and your connection to people who care about you are a higher priority, at the very least. By the time they're sophomores in high school, age 15 to 16, most students are ambivalent readers at best. Add to this the hormones and the teenage drama and social anxiety and the idea of being put on the spot to perform in front of your classmates without having had a chance to prepare, they'd probably rather get a root canal. Humiliation is a miserable experience. So the key to making round-robin reading a useful practice is to sever the connection between public struggle, or even public failure, and humiliation. Breaking this connection has long-term positive effects for students. Students who view failure as an opportunity and a normal occasional part of life are more likely to be curious, to be willing to try new strategies and ideas, and to persist through challenges. The fact that round-robin reading is so strongly associated with struggle, failure, and humiliation is exactly what makes it so useful in building this sort of resilience. So, here are the guidelines that I give students. The first is the minimum amount of reading for each reader. Each student has to read at least one sentence. One sentence. Granted, sometimes a sentence will be long-ish, might have multiple clauses, But it's still just one sentence, you know? Just one. That's not so bad. So that helps to reduce some of the pressure right there. The second is what they should do when they come across a word, or especially a name that they're not sure that they can pronounce correctly. I tell them they have to give it their best guess and to state that guess confidently. This almost always prompts the question, how will you know it's our best guess? If it doesn't, I ask it rhetorically. Basically, the guess has to make sense. If there's a reference to Don Quixote and they say, Doan Quizcote, I'm perfectly fine with that. However, if they say, Doan, I don't know what that is, or Doan something, well, that makes me question where they got the pronunciation something based on the letters that are on the page. In fact, if a reader makes a guess that's incorrect but reasonable, I'll ask the class to pause after that student finishes reading, and I'll point out that I notice their hesitation and that I appreciate and admire their courage in making a guess. I'll give the correct pronunciation, but also point out the way they use their understanding of phonics to sound out a guess that made sense based on the spelling. I will praise their bravery and thank them for being willing to let me see their thinking process. The final guideline, number 3, is that when it's not their turn to read, students should be reading along silently. We have a discussion about this. What will I, the teacher, see that makes me think that they're reading along? They start off with things that they shouldn't be doing. Don't be on your phone. Don't be talking to somebody else. But I pursue that. What would you reading along look like to me? With some nudging and encouragement, they come up with some good specifics, positively stated. Looking at the book, being on the correct page, turning the page at the correct time, etc. I tell them that I should be convinced by what I see that they're reading along. They can fake it and fool me. It's good enough. Then I ask them what they think they should do when they hear somebody else stumble or pause at a word, phrase, or name that they know how to pronounce. Generally, there's hesitation here because they can tell that there's a right answer, but they're not completely confident about what that is, about what I'm looking for. So for guidance, I ask them to restate Rule 3, what they should do when it's not their turn to read. They'll usually start off with read along, so I add read along what? Expectantly. Tentatively, a few of the students will mumble silently. I'll smile, give a double thumbs up, and then say, okay, everybody now read along what? And then prompt them until the chorus of silently is significantly more confident. Then I'll ask, so can you correct someone silently while you're looking at the correct page? They start thinking about how they might manage this. Sometimes I get some really creative replies, but I shake my head and say gently, no. It might be hard, but you need to let people struggle. If we only ever do what's easy, we don't improve. Prior to class, I will have checked my roster to see which of my students are also in weight training for physical education. I'll ask one of these students what their max is for squat, which tends to be one of the higher lifts. It's not that hard to get up into 3 digits. Some of our athletes squat over 400 pounds. So let's say they answer 250. Okay. I ask them how much the bar weighs. 45 pounds. Then I ask them what would happen if they did the same lifting routine they usually do, just using the bar. Would they struggle? No. Would it be easier? That usually gets a chuckle as well as, yeah. And I follow up with, well, why don't you do that? It'd be easier. Because then I wouldn't get any stronger. I hold that student's gaze just for a few moments, and then I nod. Not all struggle builds strength, I tell everybody, but struggle at the appropriate level with appropriate support, that is what does. I point to my Challenge Yourself poster, which is one of my oldest ones. That construction paper, that used to be royal blue. I tell my students that the reason it's over the door is that once they leave the room, they will have to challenge themselves. But while they're here, I will challenge them. This class will often not be easy, but also I will do what I can to make sure the challenges I provide are at an appropriate level for them. And I promise that I will support them. So ultimately, in my classroom, round robin reading isn't about the reading at all. It's about small struggles, just one sentence, and about victories that are equally small but meaningful. My hope is that students begin to regain some of their confidence in themselves. They learn that failure doesn't have to mean humiliation. And they learn that with support, they can do things that challenge them. And that's one of the most important things that they can learn in my class. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Thanks for listening to me go on about something I care about. I would absolutely be delighted if you would leave me a comment. Tell me your memories of reading in school or of having somebody read to you. I would love it if you share it, especially if you have book recommendations. Bye for now, everybody.